The Bear Down Report podcast, featuring Mike Page, Logan Bradley, Jack Wright, and Ryan Dangle.
Bear Down Report.
All right, folks, and welcome to the third episode of the Bear Down Report podcast. We've got Jack Wright. We've got Logan Bradley. We definitely have Mike Page, and I'm Ryan Dangle, folks, here to talk with you guys about some Bears football, some college football, a whole bunch of stuff in this week's episode. First things first, let's going to turn it over to Logan, who is our college football expert. Logan, what's going on in college football right now?
There's a few things going on, like trying to play a season. That's potentially happening, but no, something I kind of wanted to touch on today was Big Ten wide receivers, because, you know, we're in Big Ten country. We watch a lot of Big Ten football, some more than others maybe. But there's a whole lot of good Big Ten wide receivers that are playing in that conference that you kind of wouldn't expect, and are names that you might want to look out for at the next level. I'll just kind of go through a few of them. Ohio State has a guy named Garrett Wilson, and they kind of just churn out wide receivers. I mean, yeah, Michael Thomas, Ted Ginn Jr. might not be a great example at the moment, but he was good at one point during his career. But Garrett Wilson's a sophomore. I think he just went for 169 yards against Indiana, but he just makes insane catches. I remember last year in the college football playoff against Clemson, he went up, and you can look up the catch, but he went up against the defender and literally high pointed the ball at a ridiculous angle and came down with it. So he's kind of proven to be able to make big catches. He's athletic as all heck, and he's not going to come out, I don't think, at this year's draft class, but I would assume probably next year, and he's going to be a name that'll shoot up boards quickly. Another receiver, Ty Freifogel for Indiana. I mean, a bunch of Indiana players are kind of making themselves known this year, obviously, with how they've been playing, but Michael Penix has been throwing that guy the ball. I think he's had 2 straight games with 200 plus receiving yards. He's a name that's easily shooting up draft boards right now, and I think he might be draft eligible after this year, not completely sure. 2 other guys on Purdue, David Bell, and then everybody kind of knows about Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore is kind of a smaller, shiftier guy. He just finally played his first game this year, and he immediately changed the Purdue offense. I mean, Purdue offense is, you don't even need to know that much about college football to know that that's probably going to be a boring offense. All due respect to Kyle Orton. Of course, Kyle Orton was a great quarterback, but
Drew Brees.
And Drew Brees, okay, yeah, that's very fair. But, you know, Kyle Orton always comes to the top of the head as a Bears fan.
Neckbeard.
But yep, Neared. Yep, that is fair. But no, the other guy, David Bell, he's a guy you are starting to hear about more, but kind of an undersized guy. He'll be an interesting person to look at, just strictly based off the fact that he kind of catches everything. He doesn't have those refinements kind of to make as a wide receiver that I think a lot of young guys might need at the next level. So that's an interesting name as well. And then kind of one other that I'll touch on is Rashad Bateman, Minnesota wide receiver. He's a guy he actually was at first, I think, declaring for the draft last year, but then everything kind of happened. So he ended up coming back to Minnesota. He's like a tried and true, like he'll probably be a 2nd round pick in the NFL draft this coming year, but he can kind of do it all as well. He's got good size. He's been able to get open consistently. So that's a guy that I would say the Bears should definitely be keeping their eye on. But just the Big Ten's been surprising. You think of, you know, running the ball consistently and then punting the football. That's Big Ten football right there. But there are a bunch of guys right now who can really, really play wide receiver and who will be good at the next level. But as far as other things, college football related, I'm going to stick with Big Ten, give Northwestern some credit for what they've been doing. I mean, their defense has been insane. I think for the first time this year, this past game, I think they gave up points in the second half. I'm pretty sure it might have been the first half. I'm not sure. But anyway, they've been insane in the second half this year, which kind of begs the question. I don't know how much you guys are keyed in on Pat Fitzgerald, but like transitioning to NFL talk, he's a guy that you got to think one day a team's going to be able to pry him away from Northwestern. I know he does not want to leave, but man, if the Bears are looking for a new coach one day soon, which I would assume they will be, considering what we talked about last podcast, I would be very interested in Pat Fitzgerald and just whether we'd be able to even entertain that idea, because he really is a hell of a coach. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on Pat Fitzgerald, but big Chicago guy seems like a good fit.
Well, especially considering, the strict academic rigors of Northwestern, the people that they can recruit is a little bit different than what you could necessarily get at I'm throw out that school, I'm not even going to name a school, just thinking about all of that. Folks, I got to say this, I am stoked to hear this offseason what Logan is going to say about the draft. I was looking through old text messages and I couldn't believe it. I said, all right, Logan, tell me someone that the Bears should draft that is maybe not on my radar right away. And sure enough, the very first name, Jalen Johnson, cornerback out of Utah. And now as I sit back and I'm just, man, this dude knows his college football. But bigger than that, we are so thrilled for Logan and his entire family. Logan became an uncle. And so Logan, huge congrats to your brother, to your whole family. We're thrilled for you, dude. So just awesome news.
That.
Congratulations,
Thank you very much.
Logan.
He is going to be a Bears fan, I would assume. So he has that going against him to start, but he's going to be a good one. He's a cute kid.
Dude, we're stoked for you. We're stoked for your family. Send all of our love out to the whole Bradley crew, man. We're just elated for you guys.
I appreciate that, guys.
All right, and next we have our NFL insider, Kevin Nalewski, bringing us around the NFL. Kevin, what is going on?
Well, we got a lot of interesting stories going on. First, of course, you never like to hear about what's going on with our young QB, Joe Burrow, but it's all but confirmed at this point that, the rising star in the NFL is most likely out with an ACL injury. After his game against Washington. He was actually, and I kind of saw this stat popping up all over the internet, he was on pace to be the first rookie QB with 300 passing yards, 6 out of the first 10 games, which in a place being that young, given the mantle of an offense like that, those are impressive numbers. So he actually sent out a tweet that says, he's going to be back next year. See you next year. So, he's looking forward to getting the recovery process started, sounds like. We also have the Tennessee Titans improved to 7-3 with an OT win in Baltimore. I actually caught the end of this game. Derrick Henry had 28 carries, 133 rushing yards, but his one TD did not come until the OT when the Titans wrapped it up there. And one thing I'll point out, this is kind of a cliche, I feel like, every time I hear people talk about this, but Corey Davis plays for the Tennessee Titans, had his big game, 5 receptions, 133 yards. I actually played against Corey Davis in high school. Graduate of Wheaton Warrenville South he was, and I'm not taking anything away from Corey, but when we played, he was okay. And then he had an amazing time in Western Michigan, and now he is ruling in the NFL. So that's my little tidbit. Again, a little bit of cliche, but personal connection to him, and good job, Titans.
So basically what you're saying is you should be playing in the NFL, is basically what I'm hearing out of that.
In no way, shape, or form is that what I'm implying. I am too small and not ferocious enough. But, Corey Davis obviously got the stuff. The Saints stave off the Falcons without Breeze, 24-9, which I actually checked in on this game at halftime. It was real close. Taysom Hill, 18 for 23 passing attempts, 233 yards, but 51 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns. They're a good football team, plain and simple. I mean, you take out someone like Breeze, an amazing football player, amazing leader. You take him out, and the fact that they're still able to win an NFL football game, it's kind of an amazing thing. Also, update on Breeze, he broke almost half of his rib cage, 11 out of 24 ribs. That is amazing. We're waiting for him to get healed up as fast as possible because even though they did win, the Saints do need him to make a deep run in the playoffs.
The Steelers have improved to 10-0.
They 27-3 win over the Jags. Not very impressive on the Jags side, but it is impressive to be any team that is 10-0. And of course, this is late to the game, but the Seahawks are 7-3 because of Russell Wilson. I think besides maybe Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson is like one of the perfect examples of how an amazing QB can drag a team through the mud, because for years, solely Russell Wilson, has kind of taken many wins out of the jaws of defeat for the Seattle Seahawks. So I will say The fact that Russell Wilson has never had a MVP award for him is kind of ridiculous, but that's a whole nother discussion. Now, of course, we get to the NFC North, the important developments going here thus far. Unfortunately for the Detroit Lions, they were shut out against a 3-7 Carolina. Guys, I don't know if you know about this. A shutout against a football team is an incredibly hard thing to do. And to score 20 points and to hold the other team to 0 points, as Carolina did, is a feat, and kind of just goes to show you how iffy the Detroit offense is. Their star rookie running back Swift was out due to concussion. You know, the whole team had 40 yards with him out, so that's probably an indication there. And Stafford was 18 passing attempts or 18 completions to 33 attempts with 178 yards. So he didn't have any stellar time there, but they are not looking good. So hopefully when the Bears get them, you know, we'll have a Bears victory there. But on to the Vikes, which I'm going to go through quickly because they made way too many mistakes against the Dallas Cowboys. They lost 28-31. There was about 8 penalties against the Vikes for around 100 yards, and they shot this almost in the foot. They gave away a victory that should have been theirs. So I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off and say there's nothing else to talk about there. And then actually, literally, you know, about 10 minutes ago, the Packers lost to a 6-3 Colts, who now improved to 7-3. And they lost because in overtime, Aaron Rodgers throws a pass to one of his wide receivers, and the wide receiver fumbles it, and that was the game. Colts would then pick up from there and kick a game-winning field goal. So all of the NFC North thus far have been handed defeats. That's all I got here.
And we want to thank Kevin Olefsky, our NFL insider, does fantastic work. We should say that he is a Vikings fan, if that was not readily apparent from that report. We're really looking forward to it. But again, for all of you that are listening, this is a big deal. Kevin has been paying really close attention to the NFC North for us, and we will be hearing from him again as the Bears play the Detroit Lions December 6th. He's been watching Detroit Lions games, so you know he needs some extra love there. Kevin, thanks again for all you do for us, buddy. Appreciate it.
Of course, and I will point out, I mean, NFC North, any team I'm rooting for other than the Vikings, it is the Bears. But hey, I'm not going to let you get away with any crap either. So, you know, I think I'm a little fair introspection to what's going on there too.
I'm looking forward to our next Bears-Vikings conversation. A lot to talk about. Thanks again, Kevin.
See you later.
So let's hop into some Bears conversation. Shocker, the Bears lost a game. They have now lost, how many is that in a row? 4 in a row, gentlemen. It has been just awful to watch. The offense has been atrocious. So we're gonna hop right back to Logan with this first question. Logan, what went wrong against the Vikings?
Ooh, a lot of things. So let's go with 3 main issues. Number one, and the thing that I would expect most Bears fans to be mad about, is just where was Allen Robinson in the second half? It is astounding. And I mean, the Bears aren't the only team in the NFL that this happens to, where all of a sudden they just forget about their main weapon who can get things done, like throw the ball in his direction. And most of the time, good things are going to happen. In the first half, it was working. They were getting the ball to him sort of consistently. I think he had probably 4 or 5 catches. And then the second half, just nothing. And it was to the point actually where his agent, Brandon Parker, as I'm sure many people saw, was tweeting during the game. He was angry about Robinson not getting red zone looks. He even specified, he's like, I don't think it's Foles' fault. We can agree to disagree possibly on that, Brandon, but he wasn't trying to come out at anyone other than he did criticize the offensive line, which was very fair. And I think in a roundabout way criticized the play calling, which, you know, who wouldn't? And that begs a different conversation about, you know, was Bill Lazor a help at all? But back to the point at hand, Allen Robinson just didn't get the ball. They didn't look his way in the red zone. And when you desperately needed points, you just didn't look at him. And kind of going off of that, Darnell Mooney, 2 targets. I mean, another thing that just doesn't make any sense to me. So number one, Allen Robinson just wasn't there. Number 2, for me, pass protection was okay in the first half. It was like passable. But then in the second half, I mean, there was just third downs. The Bears were 2 for 11. And mainly what that was just the Vikings pass rush getting after us. And who knows what the answer is there, but it was a terrible, terrible thing.
I don't know if you guys saw the score. I mean, we heard it from Kevin, right? That they lost to the Dallas Cowboys, right? And how many points they let the Dallas Cowboys put on them. It's just, I mean, the Minnesota Vikings defense isn't good, right? And the Bears were abysmal. I can't wrap my head around it.
Who was quarterbacking for the Cowboys today?
Dalton.
It was Dalton. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mike,
Well,
your
I might have
favorite.
to-
I know it's
I
your
know.
favorite.
I called him a really bad quarterback last week, and I stand by that. But if he's, racking up
Oh,
some
he's bad.
points.
Hey, every squirrel finds a nut, I think that was his case.
Cousins, man, 2 weeks back to back where he's looked good. It makes me kind of want to throw up a little bit. So
Yeah, no, me as well. But speaking of quarterbacks, my last thing about what went wrong against the Vikings was just Nick Foles is just bad. I mean, he isn't good. He throws passes that are just lofted into the air. Like you're a quarterback, you've got to be able to throw the ball, and you've got to be able to fit it into tight windows. And there's no window that is big enough for him to fit a pass into, let alone do it accurately. So it's just, yeah, the offensive line is bad. Yeah, we didn't really have any passable running backs. Artavis Pierce was actually pretty decent, but Nick Foles just is. I mean, he's consistently bad. Whereas Mitch Trubisky, he was bad, but there would be flashes. There is no flash whatsoever from Nick Foles, and it shows.
the stat line for Nick Foles is pretty awful. It's 15 for 26, 106 yards with a 51.1 quarterback rating. That is just not going to get it done at all. So, Logan, thank you for that. I'm curious, Mike, after watching this game, right, after seeing it, hearing all the things that Logan was talking about, can this season be saved? And if they somehow magically do make it to the playoffs, right, is that going to fix anything about how you feel about this team?
Yeah, I mean, the real question is, how do you define, a saved season? Does that mean you have a winning record at 9-7? Does that mean, you go to the NFC Championship, or does it mean winning the Super Bowl? If you're talking about just like a winning record, like a 9-7 record, yeah, I think we could pull that off. And if you don't think that we can pull that off, then just stop watching. There's no point to watching Bears football, right? I mean, we have to have some sort of hope, some sort of dream. Crazier things have happened. Mitch Trubisky has thrown 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to win a game before. The Bears can go 4-2 in the final 6 games to make it to the playoffs. Now, is that a good thing if we make it to the playoffs? Probably not. We're not going to go anywhere. Is my main idea there. And so, yeah, of course, it's so hard to root against your team to essentially lose, but we got to get a quarterback in round 1 next year, and so we got to start thinking about Zach Wilson, maybe Kyle Trask, some other up and coming quarterbacks, but we're definitely not going to win the Super Bowl. What's the point of even thinking about it?
I think it's cute that you just assume the Bears would use their first round pick on a quarterback. Like they're that smart. Come on, let's not give them that much credit.
But they also need tackle. They need a guard. I mean, they need wide receiver help. They need an entire new offense, right? And so just thinking about that, if it was one issue offensively, you could be like, all right, yeah, they're a quarterback short, but they're an offense short, right? I mean, we'll get into the Allen Robinson thing later on, right? And even Darnell Mooney, right? I mean, those guys they're good, but they're not going to completely change this offense. Jack, I'm kind of curious, same question I threw out to Mike. Do you think this season can be saved, or are you just kind of echoing exactly the things that Mike just said?
I don't think it can be saved. And I think mainly it's because of what we said regarding the offense. You change the offensive coordinator, basically the same results. You change the quarterback from Mitch to Nick Foles, and basically the same results. I think if you were to switch the quarterback to Mitch, I think we would still see the same results, sadly. And I do think it's because, to your point just a moment ago, Ryan, it's really broken, and to the point where I do think it's going to take an entire overhaul to be able to fix that, and that's going to have to come through draft picks. That's going to have to come through free agency. This will. I obviously have a lot of unpopular opinions, but the Bears are still paying for Jay Cutler's contract, and now they're paying for Mitch's contract. Those two things set the Bears back decades, because you think about what they could have invested in terms of offensive line play, in terms of top tier offensive skill players. And we're talking about a completely different season this year with a top-notch defense, as we've talked about before. I think, sadly, I know, especially you don't want to hear this, Ryan. I know it's a long time ago too, and it should be a dead issue, but it's really not, because we are still paying for Smoke and Jay.
Yeah, Jack, I'm not going to bite too hard on that one, because you're wrong in this one, right? I mean, that was so long ago. We're talking more than 5 years ago in the NFL, that kind of turnaround. It's not an issue anymore. Now, as far as Mitch's draft and the draft capital that they gave up for him, and that one, Jack, we're not going to disagree, right? Like, I think you and I see eye to eye on that one, which kind of leads me to the next thing we're supposed to talk about here, which is who's going to finish the 2020 season at quarterback, right? And my guy is Mitch. I mean, it's not close, right? I'm just looking at some of these things, right? So Nick Foles has a 65% completion rating. That's the only thing that he has better than Mitch right now. Sure, he has more yards, but he's played more games. He's 2-5 as a starter, right? He's thrown 10 touchdowns. Sure, that's awesome, but 8 interceptions. And some of those interceptions, I mean, people ragged on Mitch left and right? But wow, they're just really, really awful. Not even close. He's also given up 18 sacks. And this is one of my absolute favorites. Gentlemen, on 14 rush attempts, Nick Foles has rushed for 3 yards, right? As opposed to my guy Mitch, who's 3-0. Sure, his completion percentage is way down at 59.3, right? But he's thrown 6 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions, only given up 7 sacks, right? Which is still, we could say it's a lot because this offensive line is terrible. But he's also added 90 rushing yards. Now, what do you think about with an offensive line that is trash? I want a quarterback that can move a little bit, right? Because for the rest of the season, we've got Nick Foles, we've got Mitch Trubisky, we've got Tyler Bray, Kyle Sloter. Thank you, Logan, for looking up how to pronounce that name for me. I appreciate it greatly. And Deshaun Kaiser, who came in for a visit. That's the Mount Rushmore of awful quarterbacking, right, in the NFL. I keep coming back to this point, right? Mitch Trubisky was pulled for ineffective play at the quarterback. Now, if we switched it around and you're looking at Nick Foles' stat line against the Vikings, you're telling me you're not pulling that guy for a guy who's 3-0 as a starter, right? 6 tutties to 3 interceptions. I don't think Mitch was nearly as ineffective as people were saying that he was. I think it's this offense that is just awful.
One of the questions we have to ask too is, does Mitch even want the ball? You think about it, he's in a contract year, right? He's coming off injury. And right now he can point to Nick Foles and say, look, this offense is awful no matter what. It's bad teaching, it's bad talent, bad coaching, you name it. There's no way that I could have succeeded in this system. He's coming off injury. There's 6 games left. What if he hurts his shoulder again? Does he even want the ball right now? Maybe he might, milk this shoulder injury for all it's worth, really.
I'm just interested, hypothetically, say Mitch never plays another down for the Bears this year. What do you think his value is? What do you think his market will be? Do you think that there's going to be any teams that are going to look at him and be like, okay, maybe he can bridge the gap to our next quarterback for a year? Do you think anyone's going to want him as a starter? Or is it going to be someone signing him like Jameis as a backup in New Orleans?
The one that I've seen floated around, and at first I laughed at, but now I don't know how funny it is, considering how bad Cam Newton has been at times. If anybody could could find a way to make the most out of Mitch, it's Bill Belichick. I don't know necessarily that they're going to bring him in for starter money, because that's not what they do. But to bring him in on a 1-year prove-it deal, I would take that in a heartbeat if I'm Bill Belichick. Kick the wheels, kick the tires rather, and see what you got.
Look at Leonard Floyd as soon as he left the Bears. People are going to look at Mitch and be like, maybe he can. Bears just don't know how to use players. He can possibly do something else. Not saying that he would have the rise that Floyd's had with the Rams this year, but God, there's plenty of reasons to think that it's worth taking a shot on a guy that the Bears couldn't work out with.
I just don't think that adding Mitch Trubisky to the mix is going to make the Bears offense any better. And let's keep in mind, we're comparing, a former Super Bowl MVP to Mitch, so in that respect, I don't think there really is any comparison. Ryan, you and I went back, via text like we normally do. You said Foles isn't very mobile. True. And I said, well, who else isn't very mobile? And I'm not comparing Foles to Tom Brady, but Tom Brady isn't very mobile. What predicates the need for mobility? Well, if you're playing a Swiss cheese offensive line, then you've got to be able to move. Now, Foles is accurate, at least more accurate. He can stand in the pocket. He's tall. He can throw the ball deep, or at least he can throw the deeper out routes. Now think just for a moment, okay, before you go to the euphoria that is number 10, Ryan, and think about the passes that Mitch threw and the level of inaccuracy that went along with Mitch. Think about the jokes that have gone around about Mitch's inaccuracy. You think he's going to be any more accurate behind that offensive line? Maybe he can scramble, great. But to me, the two things offset them. They offset one another. Yeah, so maybe he scrambles a little bit. Maybe he makes some plays out of nothing, right? But then he's going to throw more picks. We're going to have more 3 and outs. It's a razor's edge difference, and it's both bad. But I don't agree with Mitch as the starter.
Well, that's the thing, Jack, is I don't think we agree on this one, because I've watched Nick Foles throw some passes that are way over receivers. I've seen a couple of the interceptions that he's thrown this season, right? If it was 10 throwing those, people in Bears jerseys, fans watching on the side would be up in arms and screaming, why is this guy playing in the NFL? I think Nick Foles gets a pass because he had a couple good games and he won a Super Bowl. There's no question about it, right? But was that Nick Foles or was that Doug Peterson? How many teams has Nick Foles been on, right? I think we're getting more the St. Louis Rams Foles than we are getting Doug Peterson Foles.
And again, maybe we're splitting hairs though. Those inaccuracies, the really terrible passes that we've seen Foles throw, I think are as a result of intense pressure in his face. Whereas, again, think about those instances where Mitch had time in the pocket and had a blatantly wide open receiver and just threw an awful ball, not even in the ballpark. So, again, I suppose we could go back and forth with specific examples, but if I look at it holistically, I feel like Mitch's inaccuracy is a huge liability.
Here's why I want Mitch to start. He is way more fun to watch. If I'm going to watch 6 more Bears games, Mitch gives us a what do you call it? A puncher's chance or something like that. He's going to be scrambling, escaping the pocket, making some pretty wild throws. I feel like I need to have some fun for these 6 games because the last 10 have been so hard to watch.
It's amazing. Just think of what the things that we're saying. We want to have more fun, so we want Mitch Trubisky to be the quarterback. Can you think of how backwards that is? Holy crap, that's terrible. What actually needs to happen though is we need to get every Bears fan in a room, and we need the Men in Black memory eraser, and we just need to hit that button and then watch Mitch play quarterback, and he'll still suck probably, but at least we'll be like, oh, he's athletic, and who knows what we did to get him? We probably didn't even spend that much of a draft pick,
So the only thing I'll say, the last bit of this is, Jack and I are arguing because currently we're playing each other in fantasy football, and I'm up by 5 points. He has Travis Kelce left to play, so it's not looking good. So it is a little contentious right now. But I think, Jack, you and I will agree with in this, and I do want to hear your thoughts, is neither one of these quarterbacks should be the starter next year. Neither one of these quarterbacks is the long-term answer. Neither one of these quarterbacks makes you think, man, I look around the NFL and go, I'm glad I got this guy on the side. My point, is for the rest of this season right now, I don't want to watch Nick Foles throw the ball anymore. I don't think he's very good, right? And, I think all of us are leaning towards this season is probably going to be done sooner rather than later. And I'd rather watch to see what Mitch has, right? I mean, I went back and I watched that 6 touchdown game against Tampa Bay and thought, this kid can play. Right? He needs the right system. He needs the right play design. He needs a little bit of protection.
I think it would add, Mike sways me a little bit, and you do too. It would add an element of excitement. There's no doubt about that. And it's clear that the team backs, Mitch. They truly like him, and he has leadership capabilities. If I were to anticipate it, it would be one of those situations where there's a little flash of excitement. There's a little bit of movement of the ball. And then, like the usual when it comes to the Bears offense, recently it's a complete tease. And then we just get super frustrated again. Two of the things that you mentioned, first of all, I think Mitch will end up probably somewhere as a career backup, if I had to guess, going back to that question briefly. I think also last week, Mike hit it on the head. The chances of one of the two playing, I think, are predicated on the draft and who they potentially draft as quarterback. If that person doesn't happen to be, NFL ready, then we might see some more Nick Foles, or we might see some more Mitch. But those are a lot of ifs. All
right. It's time to move into our newest and favorite segment, Unpopular Opinion. And for that one, we're going to turn to the BDR founder, Mike Page. Mike, what is your unpopular opinion for this week?
The Bears should not re-sign Allen Robinson. We should let him walk. What do you guys think about that?
The cap space is not friendly. That's all I'm going to say. It's not friendly.
He's probably gonna get 18 million, 17, 18 million. And frankly, we need to rebuild an entire offense, starting with the offensive line, right? We got to bring in at least, if we can sign an offensive tackle in the off season, that would be huge, but that's going to be really, really expensive. So that's why I was really interested in what Logan was saying about Big Ten wide receivers. Logan, what do you think, what spot in the draft do you think the Bears should really target a wide receiver?
This past draft class, I think, was really strong at wide receiver. You've seen a lot of good rookies like Jerry Jeudy, Chase Claypool. There's so many others, but it seems like this is going to be another deep class. So I don't think that that's a position you necessarily are going to want to think about in the first round, unless someone just fell to you and it was insane. But those second, third, fourth rounds, it seems like that's kind of been the Bears' sweet spot for receivers at times. And I think that there's going to be a ton of guys who are going to be available then, even another guy's Chris Olave from Ohio State, but and obviously the SEC has their fair share of guys from Alabama, I think it's Devonta something. But not worth it. But there's a ton of good guys. So I'd say second, third round, and they should definitely keep their eye out on a lot of guys around that time.
That's probably what we're going to be doing, right? I just don't think that the Bears should re-sign Allen Robinson. And frankly, Allen Robinson doesn't deserve the crap that the Bears have been putting him through. And frankly, the Bears don't deserve to have Allen Robinson either. It's disappointing, right? Because, there was this huge social media campaign, hashtag extend Allen Robinson, that went on for, 6 or 7 games, it seemed like. And then, after we got to 5-5, it was just reality coming in and just seeing Allen on the sidelines, just really upset, and knowing that, they haven't reached a deal and they're not going to. And, we have to rebuild an entire offense, like we said, and it's probably just best to let Allen go.
And it's unpopular because he's well liked, right? He's, as a Bear, he's steady, right? He doesn't miss many games. He's got great hands. He runs terrific routes, and so I do agree. I think that would make it unpopular, and there was this huge push to try to sign him. I think you're right on two accounts. One, Ryan, you mentioned cap space, so it's really good as a business move, right, to be able to free up some cap space. And although I do think A-Rob is a good receiver, I don't think he's amongst a top tier blue chip elite receiver. And at some point, aren't we going to? I keep going back to that, but can we get a D-Hop? Can we get an Antonio Brown at his peak? Is that too much to ask that the Bears can get some sort of just an amazing elite electric receiver that is amongst, I don't know, the top 5 to 7? And that's not that's not Allen Robinson. He gets no yards after the catch, for instance, and he can't blow the top off the defense. Otherwise, he's a pretty darn good receiver as Bears offenses go.
You weren't happy with Marty Booker for like a decade? No?
Moose and Muhammad.
Oh, Moose.
So let me throw this out here to Jack and all you guys. If Allen Robinson leaves, who is your number one receiver? Who's your offense, right?
Jimmy
like
Graham.
I understand if we're going into a rebuild, if they like Anthony Miller, like I'm done with that. Like please trade him away, get somebody else a little bit more consistent. I understand, Mike, where you're coming from this, and I've even thought it myself, right? But at the same time, that's your offense. The dude is going to have more than likely 1,000 yards with Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky, right? You got to pay that guy. And the Bears brass, right? Someone's going to have to go. Some big name on this team is going to have to be gone next year for them to have any kind of cap space. I understand where you're coming from, but what's your offense without
Ryan?
The
top 5 wide receivers in terms of salary. Check out the last time any of them won a Super Bowl. Teams that pay wide receivers don't win Super Bowls. And frankly, the state of the Bears offense, if you pay a wide receiver next year, it's not going to get you any closer whatsoever to a Super Bowl at all.
Well, I think going back to Jack's point, it's not a D-Hop, right? Allen Robinson is a mid-tier wide receiver, and so I totally understand what you're saying, Mike. But the bottom line, I come back to this exact same question: is who's your number one receiving threat?
Yeah, I mean,
when Allen Robinson
you got to sign someone new. I mean, when you look at when Ryan Pace signed Allen Robinson, he was coming off injury. Right, I think he signed him for $14 million a year on average, roughly. That's a steal for what Allen Robinson has been. And I totally disagree that he's, quote unquote, mid-tier. He is a top 12. He's a top 12 wide receiver for sure. In top 10 in many cases, in many statistics across the league. Definitely way better than mid-tier. So, I mean, you just got to try to find a guy like Pace did when he found Allen Robinson and paid him $14 million a year. You got to try to find someone for maybe 10 coming off injury, maybe had a bad year, and bounce back candidates. I mean, Ryan Pace has done this before too with other positions. Look at Akeem Hicks. I mean, this dude came out of nowhere, right, from New Orleans. Pace has the ability to see and project value. So that's just what he's going to have to do again for this number one right receiver role for the Bears in 2021.
Is Ryan Pace going to be around next year to make that choice?
Yeah. Is it an unpopular opinion to say that Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy should both stay for the 2021 year?
Oh,
is that unpopular? So I guess it is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Get them out.
I just threw up
here.
in my mouth a little. Does that equate to unpopular?
I've just seen enough. How have you not seen enough? What's your reasoning for that?
Oh my gosh. Well, first, I think that if you're going to pass around blame for this year and probably last year, it's got to be more on Matt Nagy. I really like a lot of things that Ryan Pace has done. Some of it hasn't worked out. He hasn't been perfect. Most notably, Mitchell Trubisky, right? That was a swing and a miss. But you look at some of these free agent signings and some of these draft picks that he's he's kind of knocked out of the park, and he's built a Super Bowl caliber defense, and he gave Matt Nagy pieces. That's what really upsets me is I really feel like Matt Nagy had pieces to work with and he squandered it. I think that if someone's going to be gone, it's going to be Matt, but I like Matt. So I kind of just want him to stick around for one more year. And Pace, I don't think has done enough to lose his job. I think he gets one more crack at the quarterback. If he can't do it with one more quarterback, then he'll be gone. And probably if he drafts a quarterback next year, give them 3 years. So I think Pace has another 3 years left.
All right. Well, that's interesting. That leads us right into my next question. If not Matt Nagy, then who? Jack, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, a couple of disclaimers, and Ryan, you've heard me say this before. First of all, I think to some extent, moving these pieces is a part of the symptom, but it doesn't address the disease. You've heard me say before, I don't think there's going to be any real drastic improvement in this franchise until it's sold. And I don't know if it will ever be sold because I understand, the heritage and the history of the McCaskies, but any other franchise, in my opinion, that does well in the NFL is a franchise where the NFL piece is just a side hustle for whoever owns it. And in that way, then they allow the football people to do the football expertise that they need to do to be successful. That's one. Secondly, I do kind of hesitate with looking to shove, Matt Nagy out the door. I do think, Ryan, you often make a great point that he's a great culture guy, and so in that way, again, a lot of ifs, but if you were to solidify the offensive line a bit, if you were to add an offensive weapon and you were to allow for someone else to call the plays, you've still got Chuck Pagano and you still have a mighty good defense. Maybe we're not quite ready for a full, retool at this point. However, I guess if we go to a third and let's just hypothetically say he is out the door, then you're looking at a couple of candidates. There needs to be a disclaimer to this discussion as well, because this is with the idea that the Bears could actually lure one of the best, candidates that are out there. And when you look at the candidates that are out there, you're looking at Eric Bieniemy, which, by the way, I think is so awesome because as a Notre Dame fan growing up, seeing, Eric Bieniemy, the enemy, in those black shoes, in those black socks, and those Notre Dame, Colorado games, those were just some of the most epic games, most memorable games of my entire life. But Bieniemy, there's two ways to go with that, right? There's this, Andy Reid, coaching tree. You got Harbaugh, you got Peterson, you've got McDermott, and you've got, Matt Nagy. They've mostly done pretty well for themselves. You could argue against Bieniemy because he's, been given the keys to a Lamborghini, and he has had the best offense as the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs in the last 3 years. However, I hear he is highly respected throughout that organization. I'm going to throw out some other names, and I'm going to tell you who I think it would be the best option personally. Greg Roman, offensive coordinator for the Ravens. You look at Robert Saleh, who's the defensive coordinator for the Niners. He's 41 years old. The defense has been very injured, and yet they are still playing pretty darn well. You go to the college ranks, you're looking at, maybe Harbaugh's done at Michigan. You probably could never lure away Dabo Swinney. Why would he come to the Bears anyway? Or you're looking at, Oklahoma's, head coach, which probably isn't going to happen. So I want, if it's possible, to try to get him in. I want to be able to get Brian Dable for a couple of reasons. He's the offensive coordinator, right, for the Buffalo Bills. He's 45 years old. He was at Michigan State University. Then he was at Alabama. And now he has been mostly credited with the success that you see in Buffalo's offense, especially with developing, the quarterback there. Now, he has one of my favorite quotes. He says, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." He's a people person. I've seen him talk to his players. He talks to them as if they are human beings, and he has great relationships with them. He's a Buffalo guy, a Buffalo native. I think he would fit really well. And if there was any chance that we could lure him and not just drop the ball like I know, Ryan, you get real upset when we talk about coaching decisions, but if that was at all possible, I think that would be ideal.
Anybody else want to throw in thoughts about that one? The one that has me thinking when you said Eric Bieniemy, just because, do you go back to that tree? Do you go back to the Andy Reid tree? Do you literally go back to Kansas City and be like, hey, that last offensive coordinator, he was good, but we want the next guy. We want the better version of that guy. It's tough because, I agree with you. There's so many things I like about Matt Nagy, but offensively, he's awful. He's not good, right? And so the question, right, is Eric Bieniemy, is he the guy? Logan, Mike, what about you guys?
I mean, I don't think that you can have buyer's remorse just because Matt Nagy was one guy who's supposed to come in and be able to orchestrate a successful offense. I can't say that I know a ton about Eric Bieniemy, but I mean, it's got to end up being sort of a similar situation to when Matt Nagy was thought of as a head coaching candidate. But at the same time, I think at that time that was more of a surprise, sort of, when he was hired. And I know that Bieniemy's now been talked about as a head coaching candidate for 2-3 years. So there's got to be some like real steam behind him being an actual candidate. So again, I'm not going to say that I'm the most well-versed in what he can do and what his strengths are, but I don't think that you should have buyer's remorse just because Nagy wasn't what you thought he was.
I think it's an excellent point. And again, let's face it, you're right, Logan. People were surprised he didn't get a head coaching gig last year. And so, I mean, he's going to be number one off the board, so he'll probably go to the Texans if I had to guess. But I think, Ryan, maybe this will appeal to you. Perhaps Josh McDaniel will look for another head coaching job. I think don't you think that would be a really great fit for the Bears, Ryan?
Okay, so other than in Tennessee, when has the Bill Belichick tree worked for a head coach?
Yeah, I was being facetious, and so I don't know as if I could think of an example. He seems to have found his niche as an offensive play caller, and sometimes I think you should stay in your lane, But again, I mean, who knows? The guy maybe wants another crack at it. I just hope that crack isn't with our Chicago Bears.
I will say one guy from the Belichick coaching tree, just to give him credit, that has looked really good, is Brian Flores with the Dolphins. He's done really, really good things, especially last year with a team that just was really bad and was talent deficient. And he's a fiery guy. He's gonna be a really good coach for a long time, whether that's with the Dolphins or somebody else. I assume it'll be with the Dolphins because they got Tua. But just wanted to give him a little bit of love because he's been very, very good.
The last thing I want to talk about offensive coordinators, I want to see what Bill Lazor can do with 2 weeks. I from what I understand from listening to people from the Bears organization talk, it sure sounded like he was calling Matt Nagy's plays, right? And didn't get a chance to put in any of his own stuff, his own wrinkles. And I would say actually in the first half, there were a couple of plays that you go, oh, wow, there's a pace, there's a tempo here. And then things kind of fell apart from there. So I am curious to see what he does. Unfortunately, it's against the Green Bay Packers, who are coming off a loss. And Aaron Rodgers is going to be Aaron Rodgers. All right, folks, it is time to wrap this up. Gentlemen, I want to hear from each of you. And Mike, I want to start with you. How do you see the rest of this Bears season playing out? Give us if you want to throw out a win-loss record or just how you see things developing from this point on, let us know. Mike, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be the worst case scenario for the Bears, which means that they're going to go 3-3. They're going to go 8-8, and which is just this NFL limbo zone, right? They're not going to get into the playoffs. They're not going to have a good draft pick. And we are going to see Mitch, though, I think, for the rest of the way. And there might be something to this whole, Mitchell Trubisky's a Bear. And if we're going down, I'd rather have a true Bear in there rather than Nick Foles, who's kind of like a hitman and a bad one at that. So we'll see Mitch run around, throw a bunch of interceptions. We'll win 3 games, lose 3 games, go 8-8. And I don't think we're going to see Matt Nagy or Ryan Pace fired in the offseason. we're gonna have one more crack at it next year. And a big reason for that too is a lot of us are forgetting that this is a COVID year. This is a really weird year, and it's extremely hard to evaluate players, coaches, front office. So much crazy stuff has been going on. It's almost like this is like a free pass, I think, in terms of evaluations, at least in my opinion.
Logan, what about you?
When you first kind of sent us the questions, I kind of read this as how will the Bears finish the season? How will they possibly do it? And that's my pessimistic view on things. It's not going to be good. They don't even really have a tough schedule down the stretch, other than 2 games against Green Bay, which almost, what are the chances that we win one of those games at this point? I don't see that really happening. And they've also got the Lions, Texans, Vikings, and Jaguars. So really not a hard schedule, but by no means am I about to sit here and say they're going to go 4-2 or something. Probably 2-4, maybe 3-3 if we're lucky. But really, for me at this point, it's just just watch Roquan Smith. Just sit back, try. Obviously, we're all going to be frustrated by these games that they're not winning, or even games that they're winning and they're winning ugly. But just sit back, watch Roquan Smith. He's been everything that we wanted him to be from the day that we drafted him. Obviously, he's gone through some ups and downs, but at this point, he's a hell of a linebacker, and he's playing at the highest level, close to the highest level that you could. So I'd say enjoy him. Don't expect much from the offense, no matter who's under center, and just try to watch other football games.
We're looking at a rough go of it. We're looking at the Packers at Packers. By the way, I believe that's going to be the night game, so that'll be tons of fun. I don't see them beating the Packers at home. It looks like a win with the Lions. I'm sorry, so they'll lose to the Packers. It's at Green Bay. They're going to win at home at Soldier against the Lions. The Texans look pretty darn good today. They could win that game, but I doubt it. So I see a loss at the Texans, a loss the next week at the Vikings, a win against Jacksonville, and then a loss against the Packers to finish 7-9.
Jack, you and I fight constantly, but I want you to see this on my sheet right here, that I have the Bears finishing 7-9, and the only 2 wins come against the Lions, obviously, and the Jaguars. Jack.
Wow, that's incredible. We almost never agree. Maybe I'll let you win our fantasy matchup.
Yeah, that's definitely not going to happen. I know that. We could start arguing about cauliflower or one of the other million things that we argue about. Vegetable. We'll leave that for a teaser for the next episode. For Logan Bradley, Mike Page, Jack Wright, I'm Ryan Dengel. We are the Bear Down Report podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please tell your friends, tell Bears fans to take a listen. We appreciate all of it, all of the feedback, and all the listens. Thank you guys so much. As always, our friends, please bear down.
Bear Down Report.